All systems go. Clear for liftoff. What's up, everyone? Tyler Tamboline here, aka ToeTagginTambo, back for another edition of the Takedown Breakdown here on the Ship It Nation YouTube station. Going to be breaking down all things Week 9 GPP review. Got the perfect lineup. Going to look at the Millie Maker winners. Going to look at some portfolios, and got a big boy booth today. I'm excited for this one. Our man Nades is back in the saddle off his cruise. Got Nades with me, and then we got Belman, my guy Matt, here with us as well. So bring you boys in. Nades, I'll start with you, man. Welcome back. Appreciate you. And we talk about the process so much at Ship It Nation. Part of the process is going back and seeing what happened over the weekend. What can we glean from that to maybe bring forward to the next few slates, etc.? What's going on, my man? How you doing?
Doing good, man. Excited to be back with you two here in the booth. This is one of my favorite shows we do here. Just looking back, and you always talk about too, right? Reviewing your process before going in. It's just as important, if not more important, to review after the fact, right? Once you have kind of the picture of the puzzle that you're trying to create right in front of you, and kind of reverse engineer how the thought process could have went into. Obviously, we don't know the direct thought process, right, that goes into these lineups and optimizer sets, right, when these people are running their stuff. But how can we kind of reverse engineer that out into a smaller scale to our portfolio, to our members' portfolios watching the show? So looking forward to breaking it down. Crazy day yesterday. Hoop said it was high scoring. Who runs better than Hoop? Nobody. He nailed it again. But looking forward to breaking it all down.
Yeah, I think it's when we get there. There was like almost 265 points or something like that for the $20 Millie Maker winner yesterday. Matt, what's going on, man? Back in the booth. You were filling in for Nades. We said, this makes sense. Let's just get 3 people in here. I love what Nades just said, is you don't always know what other people are thinking. Where I originally sort of got connected with Matt and met him was in the DFS Mastermind project, where we are going behind the scenes and behind the mind and starting to learn what others are doing. We have that over at Ship It Nation. You can check it out. But just to note, you and I and Nades, obviously now we're all the 3 of us together, are able to give at least our thoughts on how we see things. And it is important because people say, oh, you already got the puzzle. Of course, it's easy now. You know the answers. But it's what did others do with the same puzzle pieces, and how can, like Nate said, can we reverse engineer that to be able to use that moving forward? What's going on, man? How was your weekend so far?
Weekend was good, man. Excited for Monday Night Football tonight. Got a nice NBA slate. Odunze with the killer 0 in a game with 100+ points, it seems. So that was a shocker. You know, or I know at least, how much I love being on this show. Oftentimes, my weekend in DFS was just okay, nothing great. Oftentimes when you're not doing great in DFS, shows are a struggle. But even after a non-great weekend at DFS, I couldn't wait to do this show with you guys. So excited to talk over the slate. I think we can take some notes and learn some stuff. Yeah, we already have the pieces to the puzzle, but that just makes it easier to talk it over.
Yeah, and you can also go back and see how others built it. That's what I love. It's like that's what you pick up. The same people winning, the consistency of it. We're all trying to do the same thing. Everybody wants to achieve that highest level, whatever that is for you, whatever your goals are. Of course, winning the most money possible is a key one, but there's stepping stones to get there. If you're turning $75 into $8,000+, had a nice a member hit me up in a DM yesterday. I just posted on our X at Ship It Nation, and he was saying, I love the new Leverage Lane show. Finally had a good week. It's like, didn't even win the mini max, but it was, what is it, $75 into $8,000 plus. Like, talk about ROI. That is phenomenal. However you look at it, well, some people say, oh, but I'd like to win 100K. We all would. I mean, that's the old, I'd like to win 1 million. We'd like to win everything, but
it's freaking hard to win.
Yeah, those are so hard to win when you can turn 8,000 into that. And you don't need to do this, man. We really appreciate you though. Kendall says, thanks for being a huge part of my process. Got there he is. There's Kendall, my man. I was just bringing it up. I didn't see the comment doesn't pop up right away, but the little $50, like the setup of it does, the amount that pops up. So again, thank you for the $50, Kendall. You did not have to do that. Really just love seeing the success, man. That's awesome. 3rd, 6th, and 7th. Talk about a process. Tighter player pool goes into that. How you build, all of that, man. Really appreciate you. And there he was. Thanks for the show. We were already going there. So congrats to you, man. That's amazing. That's what we love to see. So that's some awesome stuff. What were, Matt, I'll stay with you, just some of your big takeaways on the slate. You did mention Rome Odunze. You always have to wonder when a guy has 2 O's in his name. Remember, those can convert to zeros on the social media sites and in the marketing stuff. So that's always the worst. Like, you get a Cooper or someone like that. But with Rome Odunze, crazy they put up that many points and wasn't a part of it at all.
Yeah, that was pretty wild. I played a bunch of Caleb, had Rome in all my Bengal stacks. I didn't play T. Higgins after came out with the Flacco shoulder stuff. Thought really the only guy from that passing game I wanted was Chase. Turns out Higgins was the guy you needed. For me, my biggest takeaway was going right there, the Bengals. This is a team that we're going to want to have pieces of and pick on every single week. You look at the past 2 weeks, the Jets and now the Bears, both games, stacks basically have been optimal on main slates. Disappointing we don't have the Bengals on this upcoming Sunday slate. I think they're on the bye, but yeah, man, like they're reminiscent of last year's Bengals, a little bit of the Cowboys this year, but even more extreme, like especially with Flacco now, their offense is not great, but really good, and their defense is trash. So this is a team I think we're going to want pieces of and against every slate they're on.
Yeah. The other thing too is, just how condensed it is. And also, that's what we're always talking about on here when people are trying to figure out like, oh, I think Pittsburgh's going to show up today and beat the Colts, which they did. It's like, that's going to happen. And it's the setup of, okay, well, I know what I'm going to do then. I'm going to get involved in that game. But then people look at it and like, wait a minute, it's Aaron Rodgers with all these dudes. I could just pick DK Metcalf, but what if it's Freiermuth? What if it's Roman Wilson? What if it's Jonnu Smith, Darnell Washington? There's literally 3 tight ends it could be, let alone you got your receivers, your running backs, all that stuff. So that's definitely a pinpointed piece there. Nades, what was your thoughts on the Week 9 slate, sort of grand scheme overview before we hop in and start reviewing it?
Yeah, the biggest thing, too, that I take away is, number one, the Bengals, just target them always because they finally have a capable quarterback, right, even in his old age, to be able to chuck the ball. And they have really good offensive weapons like Matt talked about, right? So that's naturally a game environment, right? It's not just a bad defense. It's also an offense that can push the game environments. Dallas is another one that comes to mind, right? So between Dallas and the Bengals, I think if you just stacked against them the rest of the year, probably more times than not, you're going to be pretty profitable. Obviously, you got to get all the pieces right. But going into yesterday, another takeaway, too, is everybody's so, myself included, right? I'm sure many of us fell into this trap of, okay, Caleb looked amazing on paper, but how can I play Caleb and not play Rome, right? So everybody was tied to Rome. And that just goes to show you that you kind of got to open the box up a little bit. Everybody knows when they're going to Caleb, Rome's the best stacking partner. But you're trying to beat 300,000 people in a contest like the Mini Max. Shout out to Kendall. That's probably the hardest tournament on the site to win because there's 370,000 entrants in that contest there. When you're trying to beat a field like these GPPs, even the Millie Maker, right? When you're trying to beat 140-some thousand people, I mean, everybody knows Rome is the number one stacking partner, right? So how can you go within these expensive or within these target game environments like the Stone outlines and like all the shows and content across the industry, I'm sure, talked about this game environment due to that Bengals defense? How can you play that differently without getting off the wall and playing a diamond in the rough like a wide receiver 4, right? That's his ceiling seems like 15 points, right? You do it differently. So that's one of the takeaways for me is just trying to think outside the box, right? And yeah, Rome is the best stacking partner, but everybody knows that. What if Rome doesn't have a good game? Well, guess what? Now you just lapped all of the field in that in that target game environment that everybody is playing, and you played it differently.
Yeah, and I don't have the final scores in front of me for like Yoshi Voss versus Zacchaeus, but just noting it, and if you're not going to Rome in this spot, like this is why I think the Stone is so powerful. I always try and show this off, is it doesn't even have everything in there. Like we also got the official news on Trey Hendrickson at the, closer to lock, where it's like, if he's not even going to have that guy in there for going against him, we already had an F rush defense and a D+ pass defense. You already have Caleb showing at a high optimal number. You can easily play him with Manungai, as we're going to see people did. I hated that because the fact that Kmet was in, I kind of liked Loveland. You can always still go there, but it's not like he was popping. So if you got to that, congrats to you. But it's not like in a condescending way. I mean, like, that's awesome. It didn't make it to my portfolio, but just noting it, Nades, and you and I have done this a ton for the last couple of years now with the Stone. If you weren't going to Rome, the Stone would tell you where to go. Like, it doesn't mean it fully worked out, but I mean, DJ Moore didn't have a bad game, and Olamide, this spot here with 9.7, even with the ownership at 33, I'd still rather have almost 10% to be optimal tied to this whole stack in this matchup spot with everything else going for it. I talked about this team total over and over again yesterday. Like, them having almost a 27.5 point team total, 28 point team total is so unique that you don't see it. You have to take that into consideration. And then it would have got you to one of Jamar Chase, most likely, or Higgins. And Jamar got there with the bonus late a little bit, but not what you fully needed. It was Higgins who you wanted to have, but still, you would have at least landed on this starting point as a way to get different there. So, Matt, I'll let you hop in there if you have any quick thoughts on this one, because I know you're already talking about it earlier, but anything else to add?
Yeah, I got two quick thoughts based on what both you guys said. So first off, Tambo, based on what you said, the thing about DJ Moore and Zacchaeus, both those guys were good. They weren't like Brock Bowers good,
No.
but if you stacked Caleb with those guys and without Rome, their scores were even better than it seems because the cumulative ownership of teams with Caleb, most of them had Rome. So if you didn't have Rome and you had one or both of those other guys, you had a huge leg up. Second of all, just to touch on what Nate said, I definitely fell into that trap. I wasn't hand building a Caleb line without playing Rome in it. It just didn't seem like something I wanted to do in smaller field tournaments. My best lineups in the $20 milli were Caleb stacks without Rome. So sometimes when you're seeing Sims push out that stuff, trust it.
Yeah. I'll say, someone just mentioned it here. I'm going to go back to back here, but someone said, Andrew said, Saber Score gave me Caleb, Manungai, and Zacchaeus stack, which happened to work out quite well. Coach Stav, this is what I was trying to get. I knew it was very close, and that's why I wanted to bring this up. It's not even about the 0.2. It's not about if you didn't have the $100 to get to Yoshi Voss. It's the point of the tools and the stone and everything, breaking it down. If you were interested in this, the way to do it was like Andrew just talked about, is like, even with this ownership and this ownership, how many people are playing Williams, Manungai, Zacchaeus? And maybe it forces you to chase and you still don't get Higgins, but it's not like there wasn't other running backs and guys that got there in these spots or other receivers that you would have plugged in instead. So there was definitely ways to still get there with that as your starting point. But when Yoshi gets there in this spot, yeah, it's just you can just laugh and move on. But the point more so being, if you weren't on Rome, and you'll see it, there was definite ways to go differently. But we kept talking about using Manungai. And I think, honestly, yesterday, I know it didn't make it to the top of the millies, but even the quad stacks of Caleb, Manungai, Moore, Zacchaeus, or Zacchaeus Loveland, whatever. Again, you weren't getting to a lot of those, but those quad stacks worked. And if you overlooked, as some said, like G. Mercier here says, my mistake was not having Caleb. If you only have one lineup, maybe I get it. But if you had any type of portfolio yesterday and you overlooked it, you need to have something that can tell you a full story. It was literally one of the best matchups on paper. There was defensive injuries to the Bengals. There was a huge team total you don't often see. And if you had the tools that can show you this stuff, you would be able to see this should have definitely been in the mix within your portfolio. So I think that's important to remember. Anything else, Nades, you want to add on this? If not, I'm going to get to the perfect line and we'll come back and forth throughout.
Yeah, I'm sure we're going to talk about it more, but I just looked more into it. Obviously, this is it's important to spend some time on it because obviously all the winning lineups are going to revolve around Caleb in this game. So how people were stacking Caleb yesterday, right? Everybody knew they wanted Chase. What's the number one stacking partner with Rome? So Rome and Chase is 15 grand combined, those two, plus Caleb throwing that salary, right? DJ Moore, Zacchaeus, T. Higgins is 14.4, $600 cheaper, the exact same game, leverages everything within the game, and you're not going off the board, right? Zacchaeus is going to get an increased role. His projection was good, right?
Sorry, just throw in.
Right. Yeah, no Luther Burden. So you're saving $600 in a fraction of the ownership without getting crazy, right? So just looking through little things like that, and you're using up all three wide receiver spots within the same game environment when you know people want to go three running backs this week, right? So now you have to make a choice. Are you going to use another wide receiver, right? Are you going to go to a double tight end, right, in the flex? So didn't want to call that up. Looking at the perfect lineup here. A lot of these plays are going to show up everywhere. Obviously, the Rico Dowdle stuff. You could have got to him, but really throw him out, throw in Manungai there, and you leave more money on the table, and you're still probably dog walking every field that you play. It's just good plays in general, right? The T. Higgins leverage off of the chase within the same game environment. The thing I want to talk about is how you could get to something like this, right? Drake London. I want to talk about him. He's $200 cheaper than Rome Odunze, right? Not results oriented, but Drake London's been chalk since the start of the season. This is the first week he hasn't been chalk. You look at the Stone, I think it was an A rush defense for New England, so you can't run on them, right? Obviously, Bijan's involved in the passing game, but their pass defense is a D. How are they going to score points in a 45.5 point total as a 5.5 point underdog on the road in New England? They're probably going to throw to their number one wide receiver, who's finally back in that offense with Penix. So little things like that, jumping on these plays that are still good plays that everybody wanted for weeks before. And now due to the nature of one game environment on the slate, the Bengals and Chicago, people can't click that name over a guy like Rome Odunze. So I didn't want to call it that. Other than that, Brock Bowers, 5K, people were talking about if Brock Bowers was 5K week 1, he would have been 60% owned, right? He came in at like 17% owned in a week where people were playing double tight ends. So things like that. Outside of that, I mean, overall, really good plays, and throw the Rico Dowdle stuff out. You could have plugged in any of these other running backs in that mid-tier range and been just fine.
Yeah, just we always do this, but funny enough, going back to the stack rankings too, didn't even have to go to the top 10 this week, Nades. It was right here. Here's Caleb. It's actually with Zacchaeus and Moore, no Rome. You could even put Jamar Chase instead of Higgins, but he's in there. You get Brock Bowers. You pick up whatever you want from the other spots. If you're not playing Mac Jones or any of these guys, maybe you play CMC, who fits the builds. You can obviously mix Monungai in with that. Like the lineup almost builds itself if you just focus on this. But when I see this, my takeaways are always like what games are involved. And if Cincy and Chicago is up here like it is, if the other stuff, I mean, that's where your starting point sort of becomes that. The chat's talking a little bit about some of this stuff. So first of all, just so you guys know, when we get there shortly, the $20 Millie Maker was one with almost I think it was an 8-point win. And even then it was 264.7. This is a 49-1 line. You can move some things around. Bowers up into here, change somebody else and lose 20 and still be at 287 instead of 307. I'm just giving like random, but 307, this is like a mass score because it's obviously the optimal. You're putting the best that you can put together. But just of noting when people are like, oh, you didn't technically need this, you didn't need that, whatever. Yeah, you didn't. But it's just, we're looking at it from this perspective. We'll see what people had that won. But what you did need is this. This is the optimal lineup. But just nobody hits that. But you would want to have this. If you needed anything, you would need this. You just didn't need this to win all the tournaments yesterday, which is always the focus. So Matt, I'll kick it over to you. If you kick out Dowdle, you kick out Loveland and Titans D, and even put in like Monungai, you put in a, whatever X flex you want to put in and move Bowers up and then pick like a more popular D, you still win the Millie Maker. Like that's the facts. You've got so much room to work with here that it's just not even close. So I'm just curious your thoughts on what you're seeing here. I think this is a definite optimal that still sort of fits the slate for places you might have wanted to be on with like Christian McCaffrey. If you're not on Jonathan Taylor, maybe you're on Pittman. If you want a piece of that Jacksonville game with the Raiders, it's Brock Bowers is back. So what's your thoughts, Matt? I'll kick it over to you.
So definitely fits the slate. My first takeaway is kind of what we talked about last week, or I was harping on that on any given slate, even on a 10-game slate, not a 12 or 13-game slate, there's going to be a lot of really, really good plays. So this lineup looks like it fits the slate. I think that and when I say I mean basically everyone in the DFS community these days is so used to stacking that seeing the Caleb with just Loveland and just Higgins seems a little bit odd. But again, that goes kind of with what Nades was talking about, how there were other really, really good plays on the slate that just weren't getting love. Drake London was one of them. Obviously, Brock Bowers. You could replace Dowdle with Monungai, but even Dowdle himself, like there was reason to like him in big tournaments. I heard him mentioned a little bit across the industry, but not enough, especially with the coach speak that Hubbard was going to be phased out a little bit. Dowdle has been really, really good, and it wasn't a good play on paper. 13.5-point dogs on the road. You expect Green Bay to kind of dominate that game, but he came in so low owned that I think it was a interesting play, if nothing else, in tournaments. So again, this lineup to me looks like a bunch of just really good individual plays pieced together. You've got the Caleb, Loveland, Higgins mini stack, but after that, just really good individual plays that happen to work out. Yeah,
you'll see it when we get to the Millie Maker. There's some just crazy lineups up there that seem to make a ton of sense when we get there. I don't have too much else to add. I just think it's interesting. Like we said, with Drake London coming back, everyone wants him, then doesn't want him when they get the full Monty. They're 5.5-point underdogs. Like it makes sense. It's a good pass defense spot for them to be able to go up against. And so I think that if you're not playing Jonathan Taylor, landing on Pittman, the Jacksonville game was definitely an interesting one. And Bowers came in way under what people thought he was going to be. So he was a smash spot there. And then Higgins, but the more balanced, a couple things that stood out to me, and we mentioned all this stuff last week between the shows and leverage lane and all the different things that we do, was really roster construction. You could see something like 2 tight end be able to get there. In this case, people probably weren't on Loveland, but there was other opportunities, but certainly Bowers being one big one. These prices are, way less than your wide receiver ones on all these other teams, and they can put up 46s. Not all of them did, and Kraft got injured, and Warren didn't have a game, and all this stuff. But it felt like I teased earlier, like the clocks went back an hour for those that do have daylight savings. I was at a little party at my sister's house. She does every year, an annual NFL, like it's usually Christmas, but we were doing it in November this year. Anyway, it was, we said, did the clocks move back a week? The slate started like it was National Tight End Week. And so we were right back to it. And you could see that. But really the thing that stood out is the more balanced build. 5K, 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 64, 5K, 5K. You're going to have some mixes, the 88, the 33, but that's at like a couple odds. That's at a onesie, and the running back that's kind of the highest price on the slate, I think, outside of Jonathan Taylor, which you weren't on in this lineup. So just noting that the balanced build is kind of what came through. But let's kick it over. Let's look at the $20 Millie Maker. And iKeyser 21 was the $1 million winner, 264.7 over 257.6. And it was a Caleb Williams, Olamide Zaccheaus, Manungai with Jamar Chase on the run back, no Higgins. It had McCaffrey, Warren. It had Drake London, Brock Bowers, of course, and then it landed on the Tennessee defense. So, Nades, I'll kick it to you first, man. This is a Caleb triple stack, a Jamar Chase run back, sort of filled it in with the value, like other good plays across the board, and then landed on a defense that not many got to this week, which was the cheaper Tennessee defense, but going up against the Chargers, where, it wasn't like there was a ton of chalk there or anything, but it's the cheap D that got there this week.
Yeah, no. The thing I'll say about that is it's the opposite side of the Chargers D, who everybody wanted to play, right? And pair up with Kamani Vidal. How many times have we seen that? It feels like almost every week we review this stuff, Tambo. I've been doing this for 2 years with you now. I feel like more times than not, anything we come is the opposite defense of the chalk defense everybody wants to play, right? Defense is such a variable position. Everybody thinks they know what they know, and they don't, right? That Bears game opened up with a pick six to the house, right? Or a fumble recovery to the house, just little things like that. That's all it takes. And at 2,300 on the opposite side, right? You could definitely get there. Thing I want to talk about is Jaylen Warren, right? He didn't have a good game, but he was projected to be one of the highest owned running backs on the slate. And then we got all that news. Not all of them, right? You can at max play 3 running backs in a lineup. So not everybody can be 40% owned, right? You knew McCaffrey was going to keep his ownership at the top because people weren't really spending up to Jonathan Taylor. They would much rather just play $1,000 cheaper for McCaffrey when people were playing Danny Dimes and those stacks with Tyler Warren and Pittman and all these other guys, right? So Jaylen Warren getting steamed and held in check. You knew you kind of got to figure that out looking at the slate and looking at ownership and running teams, and you can kind of understand who's going to get held in check, who's not. The most comfortable run back in that game environment was DK Metcalf, right? So more people are willing to click DK Metcalf than Jaylen Warren when you got Manungai, you got McCaffrey, you got Travion Henderson, you got all of these guys in the running back position. Not everybody can play
Trey Vidal, Gibbs, literally so many options that people wanted to play. Yeah.
So many. And when people were playing a Steeler, they were playing DK Metcalf, right? So just keeping things like that in your mind. When Jaylen Warren, he didn't really get there, but he could have absolutely nuked the slate like he always could, right? And 8%, I think he was projected to be like 25, 30%, right? So that's one of those moonwalk plays. We've seen that with Jonathan Taylor early on in the year. So just looking through little things like that, how could you get to a roster construction like this? That's where using an optimizer to your friend, right? Even if you're not playing 150 lineups, running as many lineups as you can run, look at the different constructions, right? I know you run the optimizer tons of times. I run it probably 50, 60 times just to look at the different team combinations that are coming up. And then how can I put that back into my process to build more competitive lineups, hopefully that can get there. Outside of that, I mean, we pretty much hit on this exact lineup. There are a lot of pieces, right, from the optimal, give or take, right, a couple of the Loveland stuff. But overall, I think thinking outside the box and stacking Caleb with 2 cheap stack partners, Zaccheaus and Manungai, and just saying that, hey, Caleb can spread it out, Rome, DJ Moore, whoever else, the 2 tight ends, right? Which we knew the tight ends going in. I know you and Alex talked about it on Saturday. I mean, Cincinnati, their 2 worst positions are running back and tight end. It's just, I know you wanted to go in on the tight end, but then the Komet news kind of took you off. It is still, I think they're averaging 6 points more than their median projection, 10 points more from the running back possession against Cincinnati, and nobody stacking Caleb Williams with Zaccheaus and Manungai, and then running back on the other side with Chase. But overall, really good play. Opposite defense of the chalk defense is the biggest thing I take away from this.
Yeah, and just a couple notes, and I'll kick it to you, Matt. One, I want to give Alex props on this. I know he really monitors the ownership. He does, and looking at it, like Warren ended up, he said Warren's going to moonwalk. It just can't happen. with the Monungai and you start with Monungai and McCaffrey and just walk it back from there. Well, when Monungai gets to 55%, 54.7 in the milli, sorry, excuse me, it ends up being that this number has to come back. Now, people that have the stone got to read this and think about these things when you're looking at the stone, because now if he somehow, again, I would never have expected 8. I would have thought like 10 to 12. And so like whatever, it's a few points here and there. But if you put an 8 here, the leverage is through the roof that you're getting on this spot for a Jaylen Warren versus the DK Metcalf number is not going to moonwalk back that much. So you're like, okay, that's a spot that I could get leverage on. The stack ranking is not that great. They have a better opportunity against the pass defense, but this guy could catch passes as well, things like that. The other note was the Titans D. For the cheap Ds, I went back and looked at the stone. It's still up. Members can go check it out too. It's not like it's huge, but it had a lot more, it had a lot higher optimal percentage and a higher leverage. And that was at 2.3 and I'm coming at 1.8 or something. So if you were landing on a cheap defense, there was a possibility you could have landed there if you were checking it all out and putting it together for your own player pool. Matt, I'll kick this lineup back to you. Let me go away from the perfect. Back to this. Anything you want to add on this one? I'm going to check out a few more up top here, though, but I'll let you go ahead.
Yeah, real quick, touching on what Nate said, I think he's spot on with the defense opposite the chalk defense, because everyone thinks they know, but we really don't know. The NFL is such a week-to-week entity that, using the leverage like that, especially when you're saving so much salary, makes a ton of sense. The biggest takeaway from me from this lineup, and it kind of goes into what I was talking about earlier with the perfect lineup, it's rare we see this. Oftentimes we see must plays, guys you had to have. And we had a couple of those yesterday. Monungai obviously was chalky and did really well. And Bowers was the other guy you needed. But this was a slate where you had to not have Rome. The ownership of teams that had Caleb, most of those teams had Rome. And because you needed Caleb, you got such a big leg up on the field by playing Caleb without Rome. I'd love to see that broken down, like the ownership of just Caleb teams and the ownership of Caleb teams with Rome, because I would venture to say that the majority of Caleb teams, even in the $20 milli, had Rome. So it was one of those weird slates where you had such a big leg up by not playing Rome.
Just trying to see if I can track it here real quick while we're live. Going to pull that up. I want to pull up one of the comments in the chat too. I'll talk about it while I'm doing this. Is just, American Wolf says, I think we all overthink the run back. We really do not need run backs. Just need to play teams where teams will push if playing those studs. Nailed the point. Because one thing I'll say is it's a run back can help and make it all work. And sometimes you know what it is and feel good about it. But if you're not going to use a run back, as the contest sims and things like that have got better and better and continue to show us, if you're not going to use that, then I don't think it's a bad idea. It's more of knowing, can the other team still push them, which is your second point that I love, because it's like if they can't do that, then the other stack may not have a way to get there. But if you think the other team can push them, that's where it makes a ton of sense. And that's where I think people got to do a better job of just recognizing that. So let me pull this up. If I go Rome and Caleb, I have it here. I'll pull it up live on the show. It's the cool thing. It's called Stack Seeker. And so you'll see it's right here. 8,910 lineups in the $20 milli maker yesterday. So 5.76% had Caleb and Rome. I checked him off. I think he's, where's he at on here? What am I sorting by, man? Sorry. Doing this live right here. Rome is checked on. Anyway, you can see it right here. Players in stack, those two. So what did you want me to check it against?
So check it against just Caleb lineups without Rome.
So if I just click onto Caleb, I think you have to put two people though. So so you want me to check him with versus DJ Moore, for example?
Sure. Yeah.
How much was?
But that won't. But this will also include lineups that had Rome. Is the problem? Like, because some lineups might have had DJ Moore and Rome.
Well, that's right here. I think right now it's saying of the 35.95, 17.95 also had Monungai, but it's 2.3% without Rome, and even within this, only 1,200 had Rome and DJ. Right. So you see how it's working. So if I go to Monungai, let's just see Caleb with Monungai, because a lot of people, where is he at? 46, right? So 5.42%, but 4,687. So 56% of those still went with Rome, right? Versus only 21% went with DJ Moore. And then there's the overstacks. But anyway, just point being to show your point, you could sort of see how these stacks come together. It was very clear the Caleb lineups were heavily favored towards Rome, right? So anything else you want to see with this, Matt?
No, I think that was a nice way to break it down. Pretty easy to see with the numbers.
Just going back to the top, then I want to look at a couple of these others. Like this was where Myers 894. This is a great line. I mean, this is just look at this. It's Caleb, DJ Moore, Zacchaeus, Manungai. There's no run back, but then you just plug in good options. You've got San Francisco. You got Williams off a bye. You've got Brock Bowers and Drake London, and then you got Chargers defense, which didn't work out. You ended up needing the opposite side, but just noting it, like that's a quad stack that looks pretty good. I think it was this one, free. This is our specialty, Matt, right here. When Nades was away, we were talking about these and all. Look at this one. Again, didn't work in the full milli maker, but this 250 just dominates everywhere else. If you put a lineup like this together and look at it, Flacco, Chase Brown, Jamar Chase, Higgins, Manungai, Moore, Loveland, give me McCaffrey, and the opposite defense from the one a lot of people are on there. It's like just, plug that lineup together. You need that game to go off. You need McCaffrey to do his job, and you need a random defense to, who knows, like all defenses could score 8 to 10 some weeks, or, one outlier that nobody has. So it doesn't really matter as much. In this case, though, that's a pretty good lineup that just gets put together that way. If we flip over to the 555 milli maker, I know Youdacao won that yesterday, and everyone, all the classics up there. You got MokLovin, Fantassin, you got BK Ryder, like just a bunch of the who's who up at the top there. But here's Yudacao's winning lineup, Nades, and it was 0.08. Got to sweat the stat correction over his old friend MokLovin, battling plenty over the years, those two. And you see here, Caleb, Manungai, DJ Moore, Loveland. So it was what we talked about. You're going to need these quads. You put those together. You end up on McCaffrey, Puka Nacua, Romeo Doubs, double tight end, and Detroit D. I will say that's the leverage lane that I called out was the 4-man stack with the double tight end. Happy to see it at least get the job done somewhere. But your thoughts on this one, Nades? It's a pretty solid lineup. Your boy Romeo Doubs in the mix too. Shout out Packers and all the homers like Nades. We love it.
Yeah, no, Romeo Doubs, I mean, that wide receiver ones against Carolina is number one matchup on the board for anyone. And I mean, say what you want about Green Bay. Romeo Doubs has been the only consistent outside of obviously Tucker Kraft. Rest in peace, Tucker Kraft, torn ACL likely. So that sucks. But this build, really, really good. Most people that are playing Detroit defense, I would likely say they were probably pairing up Jahmyr Gibbs. So doing that differently, I think is a way to get different there. Obviously, if you played Jahmyr Gibbs, you were not at the top of the leaderboards. You were at the probably towards the bottom and trying to catch on to a min cash there. The Puka Nacua play, that's another one that you knew just couldn't get played because people in that range were clicking Jamar Chase, especially in a game environment or a lineup stack with Caleb Williams, right? They were in that price range. If you had 8,400, 8,500 left, they were clicking Jamar Chase. So clicking Puka Nacua in a Caleb Williams stack, that's what you talk about a differentiator, right? All Puka Nacua has to do in a lineup like this and this setup is outscore Jamar Chase. Well, guess what? He did. And Youdacao won the milli maker by 0.08, right? If he plays Jamar Chase there, he does not win, right? The 555. So little things like that, you have to be able to understand when you're fading someone, what are you fading and what do you need your guy to do to beat the guy that you're fading, right? In this case, any given Sunday, could Puka Nacua outscore Jamar Chase? Absolutely 100%, right? Rams, one of the highest implied team totals on the slate. They're playing literally New Orleans, who can't stop a nosebleed. It was one of the best spots on the slate, and you knew people in that range were playing Jamar Chase. So I think that's a really, really sharp play in general. You're not spending up to a guy like Josh Jacobs, who everybody, or Tucker Kraft, right? You're going to a $5,200 leverage from the same team off of Tucker Kraft, where people wanted to go to when they were going at tight end. So you're not playing Tucker Kraft, you're playing Romeo Doubs, but then that gives you the opportunity to play Brock Bowers there in the flex when you could have played both. So overall, really, really good team. And just the little things, the biggest takeaway is Puka Nacua, where most people are running Jamar Chase in this lineup.
Whew. Look at this. 100. I mean, this is no different. People should suspect this. It's not a big deal, but just to note it, like, playing 150 lineups in the 555 milli, but committing 70% of them to Nacua with, 50% leverage, getting the leverage in on Warren, getting the leverage in on McCaffrey, taking about the field on Manungai, which, seems to be sort of the method there taking about the field on Jamar Chase, and then getting some leverage on Tracy as well. I don't feel as bad about my Tracy call now, seeing this and looking back, but yeah, it's interesting. Underweight on DK, overweight heavily on Warren. I don't know, like looking at this stuff, if you see anything that stands out, Matt, but I want to go back real quick before I kick it to you just to show Nades' point off. So a couple things. I got Caleb selected. Caleb, and this is the $20 Millie Maker, just for bigger numbers to see it. I know we're talking the 555, but, and I can go there in a second. It just doesn't matter. Just kind of showing the point is all that matters. That's why sometimes it's better this way. But Jamar Chase with Caleb, 6,500 lineups, 4.23%. Change that to Nakua, down to 1,700 and change, 1.1%. Here's the big one, though, and I can never understand this. You know how the slate's playing out. You definitely know, based on leverage lane, ownership, the common build, everything is going more of a stars and scrubs. We talked about the balance being possible. You're stacking the shit out of Caleb Williams, 0.69%, run it back with T. Higgins. When you can get a different type of build, a balanced build. What if Jonathan Taylor did have a big day yesterday? What if Bijan bounced back in a bit? There was so many different ways. What if you needed Puka in there instead? You could have had a Puka with Higgins and double leveraged it and really got a combination that nobody has, but only 1,000 lineups out of 161,000. When you think about how many played Caleb as a whole, and now only 1,000 total lineups played Caleb with T. Higgins, who's one of the run backs that can make it all work. So I don't know if you have anything to add there, Matt, but just going back to it too, talking through this 555 Millie Maker. We'll look at MokLovin, Fantassin, a couple others in a minute on this leaderboard. But anything else you want to add for this stuff or anything else we talked about here?
Yeah, for me, it all goes back to that not having Rome. And the smaller field you get, the more pertinent that's going to be. Because there's going to be more hand-built lineups in contests like this, and the smaller you go. And people who are hand-building lineups are not going to play Caleb without Rome. It's just not going to happen. So when you get a $555 contest, I would venture to say that the majority of Caleb lineups had Rome. Unlike the $20 where it's going to be split, in a contest like this and smaller field stuff, you're going to find that you're really set apart by playing Caleb without Rome.
Yeah, it went up to almost 7% in this tournament. So 5,000, almost 10. I mean, you can round it up. It's almost 10% of the lineups played Caleb and Rome together. And that's, the starting point there. So it's just one way to look at it. But you can also do it this way, because I know what you were saying earlier. You just have to reverse engineer the math. Is if you go
Caleb is only like 10% owned is the point. So like if he's 10% owned and 7% of the lineups played him with Rome, there's only 3% that didn't.
Yeah, where's what was Caleb's price again? So Caleb was 11% owned, right? And so give or take 560, whatever it is, 600 lineups called. Let's round up 700 lineups even. Half of them had Rome in it at 350 on 700ish. We'll use basic math. So yeah, half of those lineups had Rome in it, and that already killed you. So that's the point.
And the other half had Jamar Chase, whereas it drops down in this contest to sub 1% had Higgins and not Chase. So you're talking like almost the entire allotment of Caleb Williams teams had either Chase or Rome.
Or both.
Or both, yes.
Yep. Yeah, and I mean, like I said, I know Chase helped some people get there late because he obviously got the bonus, the OT, all that different stuff. Or it wasn't OT, I don't think. It went to which one went to OT yesterday? It was
Raiders.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. So they ended up going for it late in the back and forth and then sneaking that one in. That was a crazy game, this Chicago Cincinnati, after the defensive TD got called back that would have just sealed it. It gets them back out there. Like we were saying this game's drunk, just watching it back and forth. But yeah, look at this ownership overall. Now this is MokLovin's portfolio. We'll go look at his second place lineup in a second, but it's interesting. He was really heavy on the Giants stuff, right? You've got Robinson, you got Tracy, Theo, Dart, and then McCaffrey, all that goes together. On the Chicago side, it was very heavy on Manungai, but if you go down the board for him, Caleb's down here. He had him a little bit, 14 versus 10. He had Zacchaeus 12 versus 7. So, interesting stuff just when comparing the two. His lineup, Matt, was a Caleb lineup, of course, but just it was a much different setup. It was Caleb, Manungai with Jamar Chase, had a couple secondary stacks in there where it's interesting because he had the Atlanta D, but and with Drake London, but it looked like a secondary stack of Henderson versus Drake, but he was willing to play Henderson versus the Atlanta D. Who cares? Had the secondary of Parker and Bowers, and then it just lands on CMC. A lot of really good plays, leveraged in a different way, like a 4% Drake London, 10% Atlanta D, I guess, is up there a bit, but not that much for a D. I mean, still 90% didn't have it, but playing the Atlanta player against his D. So what's your thoughts on this build?
Yeah, really, really good lineup. Just put together really, really well. I don't mind the Atlanta D with Travion because of their price tags, especially Travion's tag and the fact that you'd expect him to really work into the passing game. I think that's kind of I wouldn't go out of my way to do it, but I wouldn't be changing lineups that had that. You look at this lineup compared to the top lineup, almost feel like this lineup should have won it. As you mentioned, Nades, like Youdacao using Puka over Chase in that lineup was the difference. Without that, he doesn't win it. And yeah, Chase was fine. He got there in the end, 20 plus DK points, but he wasn't as good as Puka, to your point. So yeah, really, really similar lineups as shown by their scores. Sometimes, them's just the breaks. The Loveland call, set Yuta apart there by having Loveland and Bowers. And I'm with you, Tambo. Like at the beginning of the week with Komet questionable, I really like the idea of getting to Loveland. He was hard to get to, though, later in the week with Komet back, how many good tight ends there were, how much just overall good value there was. So, props to him for getting to him.
Yeah, made sense to put it all together like this. I will say I definitely like seeing a lineup like this with this leverage built in, which still is so, think about it. McCaffrey, Manungai, Bowers, Puka, Caleb, like it's all amazing plays. Getting a piece of the Detroit game still, if you're leaving out Kansas City and Buffalo, you're still picking up on a Jacksonville spot, on a Green Bay spot where they're expected to win. By the way, that's when people talk about like the Chargers D versus the Tennessee one, which I think is interesting, is like, think about that. Carolina whips Atlanta 30-0. Then we go on and talk about Atlanta versus Buffalo. The number seems weird. Like, how is this possible? And Carolina just whipped this team. Okay, Atlanta upsets Buffalo. And now you're looking at it like, okay, Buffalo comes back and whips Carolina. Like, okay, it was just a fluke, da-da-da-da-da. Now Buffalo's beating Kansas City and Carolina's beating Green Bay. It's just like, again, not that crazy that Buffalo, I don't think that's a hot take, but I'm saying like Carolina beating Green Bay, that to me is nuts. It's just one of those things, and it's the way the NFL works. So on any
given
soap
Sunday, opera. It's like a soap opera.
It's nuts. It bounces around so much. So I love this build. When you see this build, though, this is to me, again, it has nothing to do with who the player is. I mean, we're talking about two of the best in the whole world, MokLovin and Youdacao, but I'm saying it's not really about that. It's just, it shows the different styles that can get there. I like seeing more leverage because this is how I build. I'm naturally going to have a few of these lower owned options in there and hope that that's what helps get me to the top with a nice build. It's not who you play, it's how you play them, etc. But really, this speaks more highly to it's not who you play, it's how you play them, because there is almost no leverage outside of Drake, no player leverage, particularly where you're getting a lower owned play. There's a ton of leverage in the way this is built, like people said. But I think it's just, it still has the secondary stacks. It's saying, you know what? People are going to try and figure out Rome versus OZ versus Moore versus Higgins, etc. Well, let me just take Chase, Manungai, and Caleb and wrap that up right there. Let me get a nice secondary stack. If Henderson actually does something, maybe it's London that benefits on the way back. He's got a good defense he's up against. If Parker and Bowers have a little bit of back and forth, that works and helps me get to the top and best running back. He had the same projection at $1,000 less as Jonathan Taylor, and magically it worked out that way. Like he smashed, Jonathan Taylor did not. The $1,000 saved was good. The ownership was valid, etc., etc. So my point being, there is a thing of beauty to being able to blend all these plays at 10% and above, besides Drake London, still make a ton of sense and be able to find its way to literally a 1v1 or whatever. He didn't have the $100 to get to Nakua, but maybe it's the Tennessee defense and don't play a defense against your guy and upgrade to that and just get different that way. And you win the milli that way. Who knows, between these guys are using optimizers for everything, but just to note it, it's interesting. Nades, it looks like you want to chime in there a little bit. Do you want to add anything else? And then I want to look at my boy Fantassin. He won the milli just a couple of weeks ago again for however many times it's been now. But I want to look at his lineup because I thought it made a ton of sense as well. But go ahead.
Yeah, just the you're not playing Rome, so you're playing London. You're not playing Zacchaeus within your Caleb stack. You're playing Parker Washington, correlating him to Brock Bowers, right? Where most people are playing Tyler Warren in that spot, right?
Mm-hmm.
At least in this contest. So just there is leverage built in, even though these guys, you talk about combined ownership, right? In rosters, the way he used this ownership is different than anybody else in this tournament, or majority of the ownership of those builds, right? So it's not X player is X percent owned. How is he owned in a way that it makes sense? And how is that different than what the field's playing him? And I think the London over Rome, but then Parker Washington over Zacchaeus in a Caleb Williams stack where projections were popping in Zacchaeus. I'm sure I didn't look at the ownership, but I'm sure Zacchaeus is pretty close to that 10 to 16% range in this contest due to what his projection was. But overall, his ownership is, I would be willing to bet, almost 100% tied to Caleb Williams.
Yeah, I don't think I'll be able to find a Rome anywhere near the top. I was just seeing if I could find a dead lineup where Rome hurt it, and that would be the case that I could at least find one. Oh, right here. I just had it somewhere here. So Rome was almost 10% in this one. But yeah, going back, I think this is why I love having you guys on the show with me, kind of picking out the little extras there. This is the most common question. Oh, I better cap my ownership at X number. Do you have to? You definitely don't. 233% total versus 176. The difference of 2 points, and we found it in 5 places. But to Nades's point, and this is important, is to tying into Matt's point of the whole show and the theme of this show with the Rome stuff, is most people have Rome and do a little bit something different here. Instead, he goes to London, and then instead of Zacchaeus or something like that, he ties a Parker. Even at a higher ownership, it's just how many people have the combo of this type of setup. And then one way to set it apart is just have your defense against a guy, and then you can get away with even more. So the more you build leverage in through your roster construction, not just the plays, that's the product of it, the more you're able to find ways to get different and not have to focus on this type of stuff. Matt, you want to add anything else on that one?
Yeah, one thing that we, when we do these shows and when all shows are done talking about like the week before, there's so many good plays and so many guys that had good weeks. The guys that were popular that didn't do well, obviously we're talking about Rome a lot, but another guy that we haven't mentioned once throughout this entire show is Kamani Vidal. So that was the other leverage with Tennessee's defense. And part of, for me, I was way under the field on Vidal in the $20 and the $5.55. But just because you're under on a guy who doesn't do well doesn't mean that your week's made. You got to get everything else right. So was still not a good week for me, but that's a guy that kind of gets, falls under the radar for lack of another term. And he was really, really popular in the $20 million, in the $20 and $5.55. So all these lineups that we're looking at, and we're talking about how they didn't have Rome, they also didn't have a popular Vidal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And that's another thing you got to look at. And that's where also too, what was, before I go to Fantassin's lineup, I just want to see the field exposure. Vidal was 23%. And that's where some people that don't follow it or wonder about how did people land on the Tennessee defense and what were they in this. I'm trying to see if I can find. Anyway, we'll probably find it because on the leaderboard, right? What was the someone's got to have them up here. 2%. So it's a 2%er versus 20%er. If you're not landing on Vidal, why not have the defense on the opposite side of them? That's just another prime example. Again, it's, but Tennessee sucks. Doesn't matter. We're literally, all I care about is today, and it matters because one of the pieces in the game, call it a chess game, one of the chess pieces is this, in this case, the DFS game of chess. There's people with this piece very high owned. We're trying to beat that and leverage it. It doesn't matter what happens. It's a product of if everything else works and makes sense and you land there, you're not on the other piece. It's just another piece of leverage you can insert into your lineup. All the stuff, and anybody who's watching this, you made some great points there too, of like, we barely talk about the plays themselves. Just like when we're talking about the actual shows, it's like this goes together and becomes this. We're talking about all concepts and theories, how, not who. That might be a new freaking 3-word on the shirt or a motto because it's just the whole point. It's all about how. It's not about who. The who is the after effect. Yes, you do see them. You can go buy the jersey. You can go. I know you're a big memorabilia guy, Matt. I love that shit. Go get the memorabilia when they make it happen for you because they had an outlier. But the lineup you built wasn't prefaced off of them. It's always not just that one thing. You still need 8 other pieces in NFL to go your way or 5 other pieces in a showdown slate to your 6th piece that goes off. So you need a ton of things to happen. But let's look at one more here.
That's like DFS gospel, though. The how, not who.
Yeah. It's just so many things. Focus on the picks. We got the picks. Come here. We got the winners. We got this. Hopefully you got people that actually play and win. That would be awesome to start with. But then secondary, hopefully they know how to play. And the thing I'll say, and I think it's so true, we spend a ton of time on this stuff, but it's the best players are not always the best coaches. That's another thing. There's not people that eat, sleep, and breathe, teaching, mentoring, going through, helping others and actually teach them to get better at the game versus people that just are the best at the game. Tiger Woods is one of the best golfers of all time, if not the, to most people. But, and he does a little few classes and courses and things like that here and there, but he's not out teaching. If he was teaching golf, he'd be amazing at it, I'm sure. But you're not always also going to get access to the best people that are the best teachers as well. So there's so many points to go off of just to make that known. I think it's important. But Fantassin, one of the best players in the world, my guy that I love talking to. I've met him a bunch of times, went out for dinner, him and his wife, and different things like that. He's an awesome, awesome person and an even better DFS player. So if you look at it, it's like, look at this. Joe Flacco. I should have flipped that, by the way. Shout out to my guy, Guillaume. Awesome DFS player, even better person. I was trying to say my guy. But just look at this. Joe Flacco, Jamar Chase, Higgins, Manungai, Zacchaeus. You get your game stack in there. You get Christian McCaffrey in there. Like, this lineup's beautiful. It just didn't get all the way to the top. Warren, we talked about earlier, and you see steamed up in the higher stakes stuff. So the sharper, the more expensive tournaments, not always the sharper players, but it typically is that are playing more lineups. So this did steam up and in this one, but it made sense. And then you have Brock Bowers that fills it out with the Houston D. Nades, this lineup to me maxes out the salary. It's got a fair amount. This is what I like building. We talk about it. Look, here it is again, Nades, our favorite one. Even without our old friend Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase is going to be 36%, but you can't play Flacco. Or can you, right? 36 points here. And I know, look, it didn't win the tournament. I'm just saying this is a classic thing we see so often. If this guy's going to break the slate and get to a ceiling score, you'd think this would be part of it. Now, he didn't, but you got to other pieces because of it. So, Nades, I'll kick it to you first. But I love this build, and it's got leverage built in, stacks, et cetera, et cetera. This just makes a ton of sense to me. Give me your thoughts.
Yeah, first thing I say is everybody wanted Flacco doubles the last 2 weeks, right? The Jets and the Steelers when he kind of took over center, but now nobody wants Flacco doubles in the second highest total on the slate against the Bears defense. When everybody's playing Jamar Chase, it's just the slice and dice factor within the same team, still playing good plays. You're not playing Yoshi Foss. You're not trying to figure out who the wide receiver 3 or who's going to set this game over the top. You're playing Chase and Higgins, right? Two good football players with a quarterback who's throwing for 300 plus in like 3 straight games, right? So I think that's really good. But not only that, too, the over correlation in a field like this, in a contest like this, especially for hand builders, right? This is a contest that a lot of people win tickets into, right? Outside of your pros like the Youdacao, the MokLovins, the Fantassins, all of these MME, right? 150 maxers. Most people that are playing this, or at least the casuals that are playing this, are winning their way in on tickets. Right? Maybe they have 1 to 5 entries, right, in a contest like this, and they're probably hand building or virtual hand building with an optimizer, and they're going correlation, right, because they want to get right. The correlation I see here is McCaffrey up instead of Warren to the running back position. You run it back with a Wan'Dale Robinson, right? You could have, who was projecting well, still in that good game environment because you weren't playing Tracy, you weren't playing Jackson Dart, you weren't playing that. You tie it to McCaffrey as a different way, and then you go double tight end like many people were doing, right? You move Brock Bowers down to the flex. That would have costed him 4th place, right, in this just by over correlating there. So I think that's one of the call outs there, but. Just flipping the script, right? The opposite side, right? Mac Jones was a prime example, opposite side of Jackson Dart, right? Everybody wanted Jackson Dart. Nobody wanted to play the Mac Jones side. You can pair him with McCaffrey, much like this game environment, opposite side of the Caleb Williams stuff, still using the 2 good plays or 2 value plays, right? As a combo pack, Manungai 4,600, Zacchaeus 3,300 for less than 8K. You have them both, right? You're not playing Rome. That allows you to get to Chase in a different way.
Yeah, I love seeing this, like Zacchaeus. People complain about like the cheap chalk. It's like, again, 92% of the field not on him. You have a room with 100 people and 92 exit. I'll keep using this one. It's my favorite lately. Like, that's a lot of people just left the room. 100 people are standing in a room, 92 walk out. You're staring at 8 people. You're like, oh shit, there's like nobody here. But he's chalk. When people talk, the chalk smash, they're like at the chalk value. It's 8%. Like, it literally doesn't matter. So there's that. T. Higgins, 3.6%. Like, these are the things that I'm talking about that you can just find, and just people get so caught up in the mix. Hopefully this shows you today, when we're looking at literally some of the best players in the entire world that have been doing this for a very long time, just proving this stuff again and again, of like people complaining and whining over it. It's like, figure out how to get different with it. That's what this is all about. and look for different angles of attack. There's a ton of leverage still in this lineup. 85 people walk out of a room, 15 stand behind with a Brock Bowers ticket in their hand. And then there's other pieces that need to get right, but they built accordingly. 100 people in a room, and this, 12 are left over after the room exits for the Houston D, but all chalk, and they got a 0. I'm just showing you, but like, that's the other thing. He got 4th with a 0 down here. So it just shows the builds and how you can get there differently. And I think a lot of people are overthinking a lot of things, and that's what we want to learn from and take away from it. So Nades, any other final thoughts from you on just the overall as a slate, or anything you think we missed, or any of the questions you saw in the chat, or anything that people had that you want to talk about?
Yeah, no, I think this is a fun game that we play, right? We do a lot over at Ship It Nation. If you're not a member yet, you still have time to join. And I know Tambo and I are going to probably be doing the additional parts of our Saber Sim, right? Building a portfolio, building a player pool, right? And in running teams and working with that as kind of more complex. And then the DFS Mastermind, right? If you like this show, which you should, right? At least reviewing this is not our most viewed shows. It's our lowest viewed show. And I think it's the most important. It's the most important process or piece in my process, right? A DFS Mastermind, right? This is what we do constantly, nonstop over there, along with Ship It Nation, right? We're in the Discord nonstop, right? There's very, very sharp members in our Discord talking through this stuff all the time. I mean, Saturday night is like prime time. I mean, you get in the Discord Saturday night leading up to Sunday lock, and there's really good conversations. And overall, I mean, this really good week. I think we broke it down really well. And I think there's some learning points that many of us can take away, myself included, that we talked through here.
Yeah, if you don't know how to get in the Mastermind project, obviously you know how to get to Ship It Nation. I always recommend start there. Get into Ship It Nation. Our guy Go Collect is in the Mastermind program. He's been on this show, the Takedown Breakdown, with us. But he had said here, I mean, this is the key. There's certainly levels to it. Ship It Nation is built around helping anybody at any level get better. But if you're just starting out, definitely just go to Ship It Nation. Always Ship 19 gets you in 5 days for just $19. You could literally start getting access to the Stone tonight for Showdown. You'll have everything this week leading up to Thursday Night Football. You'll still get included, everything like that. And then the NBA side of things with Matt and everybody on the team with Rio and the rest of the squad over for basketball. But all the other sports going on, the how is our guy title. There's levels to this. This is it. Like Nades just showed, Matt. Him and I did. It's on here somewhere. An hour and 5 minutes of our exact process of using the Stone, taking it to the stack rankings, which you'll see here in a second. There's the stack rankings, and then taking it into Saber Sim and showing you our exact process on how we build. This is behind the scenes, totally different than like a tutorial. This is not a how it works. This is a how we use it. So that's what I would say. Anything you want to add, Matt, or any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, great show with you guys. Just one thing you said that kind of stuck with me and struck a chord is, just because someone is the absolute best at something doesn't make them the best teacher. You kind of have to know who you're dealing with. And look at managers in Major League Baseball, for instance. Stephen Vogt, just an average MLB player, really, really good manager. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, guy like Ted Williams, who was one of the top 10 hitters ever, one of the top 25 worst managers ever. So it just kind of just shows you, like, you got to deal with each individual person individually.
Yeah. If you want the tools, you want to get access to them. I mean, there's definitely a ton of coaching, teaching. That's the thing. We don't have any Ask Me Anything 1 hour segments or Q&A. Like Matt will be in there at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night with you, putting the NBA stuff in just like you are, up to lock, helping you out. Nades is in there at 2 a.m. with me. We're going back and forth on stuff in the NHL chat and flipping over. Matt's in the freaking esports chat with the crew over there too, at the late nights, early mornings, whatever you want to call it. So there is no, you only get access to us for an hour a week, and then we disappear on you. We literally are the site. That is it. You can come over and see us directly. Kendall, who just had the winner in the mini-max, says, does Mastermind go over bankroll management? Not just for NFL. I showed it up there for PGA, for all kinds of other sports, but there's direct. This is what is this one? Okay, so 40 minutes going over where I'm breaking down everything for my views on bankroll management for DraftKings. And it talks about tournaments versus standard offerings, prize payout structures, satellites and qualifiers, change your approach based on what you like for the slate versus what you see for contests, prize payout structures, and don't just trust the number at the top, and then risk management and playing what you're willing to lose, setting goals up for the year. Like there's everything for this. An NBA process is back now because we've got NBA back. So there's tons of stuff there. Go ahead. Yeah. They talked about 3 a.m. playing the Blue Jays games. Yeah,
there's also this that gets talked about. I know Tambo and I talked about it too. Just using an optimizer, right? Even without sims, right? Even if you don't have sims, SaberSim has their own sims built in to rosters, right? So just playing with an optimizer and running multiple lineups before you're actually building your lineups or looking at what your lineups are going to look like to give you an idea of what these sims, and then you take it, right? There's levels to this. There's levels to the sims. Sims are very prevalent within DFS space today. How can you beat the sims, or at least use the sims to your advantage to know what the sims are pushing and what the field is going to gravitate towards, right? The Leverage Lane show talks about that a lot. That's a free show right here on this channel every Saturday. Because sims are so prevalent, everybody's, what is that doing? What is that doing to ownership? What is that doing to roster constructions? That gets talked about here in DFS Mastermind as well. Is I think the Leverage Lane show on Saturday with Tambo and Alex Blickel a ton. So if you're looking for that, Cody and the rest of the chat, right, tune in on this channel, but more importantly, get over to shipitnation.com, get over to DFS Mastermind, because you can use that to your advantage. It's not always going to work, but when it does, it's going to pay off in a big way, and that'll pay for any subscription. Hopefully at time and place right there to pay for all of your memberships, right? And that's why we play this game. Yeah, 100%. I appreciate you guys all watching. I appreciate you guys jumping on and running through this with me. Get over to Ship It Nation, use code SHIP19, get your first 5 days for just $19. Can check out those tools. And I think that's going to be key moving forward. If you've got that stuff sort of working in your favor, get a community of like-minded individuals together. If you like this type of show and you want to get better at the game, invest in yourself. That's the way to do it. That's going to do it for this week, guys. We'll be back later today, myself, Hoop, and Title, breaking down all things for the Monday Night Football game at 2 p.m. Eastern right here on this channel. So make sure you're subscribed to all the free shows. Make sure you hit that thumbs up for us on this one. For Nades, for Belman, and for myself, ToeTagginTambo, let's ship it.